One picture captured in 1985 speaks volumes. It shows a fresh-faced mom cradling her infant girl off the coast of Greece, completely enveloped in mind-boggling wealth. Just 3 years later, she passed away, leaving the infant with endless billions she never wanted and a dark family curse she could never outrun. Hearing the Onassis name brought to mind vast influence, maritime monopolies, and exclusive retreats. Yet for the ladies born into it, the reality was incredibly grim. Before hitting her 30th birthday, Christina Onassis witnessed her whole family pass away. Athena, her little girl, received such staggering wealth that it required private security teams and brought total loneliness, causing her to spend forever running from the Onassis identity. Here is the tale of a mother and daughter who possessed every material item imaginable, yet lacked all the priceless things in life. An empire resting entirely on the ocean. Entering a glamorous reality most folks merely witness on screen, Christina Onassis was delivered in a New York City ward on December 11, 1950. Her dad, Aristotle Onassis, was busy constructing a maritime powerhouse that would eventually dominate the globe, commanding massive vessels transporting petroleum from the Arabian Gulf to western shores. Her mom, Athena Onassis, universally known as Tina, was born directly into Mediterranean maritime nobility. Stavros Onassis, her granddad, established his incredibly successful maritime enterprise long before. Together, the couple managed massive cargo ships transferring fuel from coast to coast, supplies that kept countries running, and wealth that purchased land masses and swayed politicians. Absolutely nothing about Christina's upbringing resembled a typical childhood. Instead of a standard kids' room, she claimed massive, luxurious wings inside numerous estates. Rather than a single-family home, she possessed sprawling mansions spread over various countries, with every location outshining ordinary fantasies. From Paris and Athens to Antibes, Monte Carlo, and New York. Wherever the ultra-rich flocked, the Onassis crew held their ground. She passed the majority of her youth aboard their personal megaboat, a majestic watercraft carrying her namesake. They had transformed an old military vessel into what looked exactly like an upscale boutique resort. Solid gold coated the plumbing hardware, while authentic pieces from legendary painters decorated every corridor. A gorgeous custom pool could easily be emptied out and transformed into an elegant ballroom. The iconic illustrator behind the Madeline stories, Ludwig Bemelmans, personally designed her onboard recreation area. She owned countless toys dressed in custom couture from legendary designers, and she learned to ride on miniature horses gifted directly by Middle Eastern royalty. Yet infinite cash cannot shield anyone from heartache. It merely ensures your suffering plays out on a much larger, highly exposed stage. Your private moments get splashed across front pages, and gossip echoes globally. Every trauma happens under flashing bulbs. Her big sibling, Alexander, arrived in 1948. From day one, they trained him to inherit the maritime business, step into his dad's shoes, and keep the family legacy alive. She practically worshipped the boy, trailing behind him constantly during their toddler years, idolizing him exactly the way little sisters always do. A massive staff brought them up, featuring tutors instructing them in multiple languages, instructors pushing intense academic lessons, and private security tracking every single footstep they took. Dad remained constantly occupied with his career, forever flying around the globe, perpetually negotiating seven-figure contracts over the receiver that dictated the fates of countless employees. He would vanish on corporate excursions for a month at a time, coming back bearing lavish presents and tales of high-stakes bargaining abroad. Their mom did her very best to provide a grounded environment, attempting to forge a traditional household routine, despite the massive boats, multiple mansions, and constant domestic workers. Yet maintaining normalcy proves impossible when paparazzi hound your kids relentlessly, and your deepest secrets hit global newsstands on a daily basis. She bounced between elite academic institutions, transferring constantly whenever her dad's corporate ventures required a strategic move. She hit the Hewitt School over in New York, a place aimed at turning the daughters of self-made tycoons into polished women. She also enrolled at a prestigious boarding facility located up in the Swiss Alps. It was an upscale academy famous for molding the offspring of elite royal families. She briefly attended a premier British institution, lasting barely a quarter of the year, yet she never settled down sufficiently to fit in, build deep friendships, or experience life outside her billionaire bubble. Eventually, the crumbling foundation of her folks' relationship grew entirely too obvious to ignore. Her dad's highly publicized romance with vocalist Maria Callas dominated international front pages. She stood out as an absolutely legendary classical performer of her era, renowned for her roles in La Traviata and Tosca, ultimately becoming Aristotle's ultimate obsession. The man chased her non-stop, spoiling her with diamonds and sailing away on the Christina, despite being legally tied to Tina. Pictures of the couple plastered the front pages of all the tabloids and daily papers. Christina saw paparazzi swarming their property, while tabloids tore her family's personal affairs completely apart. While everyone grabbed popcorn to watch her mom suffer pure public embarrassment, Tina Lavanos did her best to keep her head high and protect the kids from the fallout. Yet, hiding such a massive media circus from the little ones is impossible. At just 9 years old, Christina easily figured out what those hushed rumors meant. Mature enough to recognize the profound agony in her mother's gaze, she possessed enough maturity to despise the press, reporters, and her dad's new lover. Her folks split up in 1960, right around her 10th birthday. Tina packed up the kids and relocated to the United Kingdom, desperately seeking a quieter life off the radar. In 1961, she tied the knot again with John Spencer Churchill, the 11th Duke of Marlborough, a British royal who offered the grounded, respectable vibe Aristotle was completely incapable of providing. Meanwhile, Aristotle flaunted his romance with Maria Callas for ages. Yet, come 1968, he totally blindsided everybody by marrying someone entirely unexpected. Jacqueline Kennedy, surviving spouse of President John F. Kennedy. Their wedding blew up global news, totally hogging the spotlight for months. America's previous First Lady getting hitched to a massive Greek shipping tycoon. Top-tier American status blending with foreign cash. Christina and Alexander deeply loathed the union. The kids begged their dad to dump Jackie. They felt she was shady, chasing his checkbook. To them, this woman could never replace their mom or his beloved Callas. Even with PR teams claiming the total opposite, and despite those staged holiday pictures faking a happy home, Christina and her stepmom shared an incredibly icy, tense dynamic, fueled by deep paranoia lasting until Aristotle passed away. To complicate things further, Tina, Christina's mom, pulled her own jaw-dropping move. Come 1971, she dumped the Duke of Marlborough to wed Stavros Naros, Greece's ultimate billionaire and Aristotle's biggest corporate enemy. Yet Stavros happened to be the surviving spouse of Tina's sister Eugenia, whose 1970 passing raised massive red flags. Officially labeled a pill overdose, Eugenia's demise sparked intense abuse rumors and shady questions regarding that fatal evening. Watching Tina wed her dead sister's former husband, and Christina randomly getting Stavros Naros as a new stepdad, basically felt like the ultimate stab in the back. Once Christina hit her early 20s, her family dynamic resembled a total soap opera. Her dad had hitched himself to Jackie Kennedy. Her mom wed her dad's nemesis, the exact same guy who outlived her deceased aunt. Her brother Alexander completely ghosted both folks. Meanwhile, Christina felt trapped in the crossfire, observing her messy household broadcast their drama globally. At age 20, Christina finally fell head over heels, or at least genuinely believed it was true romance. She fell for Joseph Balker, an LA property tycoon. He was 47, legally separated, raising 4 girls. He had charisma and actually valued her personality over her trust fund. They officially eloped to Sin City in July 1971. Aristotle hit the roof. An older stateside property flipper was definitely not the dream son-in-law he pictured. He expected Christina to wed a maritime mogul, aiming to solidify corporate connections and lock down family cash. The old man hounded her non-stop, making things incredibly miserable and threatening financial ruin, guaranteeing she'd be disowned if she stayed with Boulard. Fast forward 9 months, Christina and Joseph legally called it quits. She essentially picked her dad over her spouse, trading her personal joy just to protect the family legacy. This toxic cycle kept popping up forever. Come January 1973, barely 2 years later, Christina's universe totally crumbled apart. Alexander took the controls of a tiny Paggio watercraft, departing Athens for what everyone assumed was a normal trip. Things went south fast. The aircraft plummeted right after liftoff, leaving Alexander with catastrophic skull trauma. Paramedics rushed him to the ER, but his wounds were fatal. He flatlined 24 hours later without waking up. At 24, he was the golden child, destined to take over the maritime conglomerate and maintain the Onassis legacy. Officials went deep into the wreck. Detectives sifted through the debris, interrogated bystanders, and explored all potential triggers. The ultimate ruling declared mechanical failure, specifically highlighting major issues within the flight controls. Aristotle wasn't buying it whatsoever. He became wildly paranoid about foul play, certain an assassin rigged the jet to murder his boy. He brought in private eyes, pushed for extra hearings, and completely denied the reality of a random, heartbreaking fluke. The actual facts meant absolutely nothing anymore. Alexander was simply gone. That favorite son, the hand-picked successor, the guy destined to elevate the Onassis legacy far above mere wealth and nautical fleets. Lost at 24, long before he ever got the chance to realize the immense potential his dad spotted, and way before charting his personal path, Aristotle found himself utterly crushed, forever altering his core being. Buddies claimed he aged 10 solid years in a single week. That intense fire which fueled the creation of his massive dynasty. That unstoppable drive pushing him from being broke in Turkey right up to ranking among the globe's absolute richest billionaires completely faded out. His boy, his hand-picked replacement, was dead, shattering a piece of his soul that could never recover. He shifted his focus toward Christina, immediately prepping her to grab the corporate reins instead of Alexander. She was barely 22, deeply mourning her departed sibling. And out of nowhere, her dad demanded she fill Alexander's role, forcing her into a successor position she was never supposed to hold. They shipped her off to Manhattan, grinding away at the corporate headquarters on Fifth Avenue, receiving grueling crash courses on maritime logistics from Aristotle's most reliable right-hand men. Dragged along on corporate travel to witness how major contracts got hammered out, figuring out skipper management and the complex inner workings of a maritime conglomerate. Yet she certainly wasn't Alexander. She realized that, and so did her dad. That glaring contrast tormented the two of them. Alexander literally grew up groomed for succession. Christina was brought up to secure a wealthy husband, forging corporate partnerships via calculated unions with rival maritime dynasties. This new gig felt completely wrong, and she understood Aristotle was only training her out of pure desperation, never actually trusting her competence. Regardless, she gave it her all. She pulled massive shifts at the main Monaco base. She soaked up everything regarding freight paths and shipment agreements, diving into petroleum commodities and coverage plans, mastering the endless little nuances required to actually manage a massive armada of freighters. She desperately needed her dad to see her competence, ensuring Alexander's tragic passing hadn't wrecked the family enterprise, guaranteeing the Onassis legacy survived. Then, come October 1974, barely 18 months following the tragic passing of Alexander, Christina answered a call that forever scarred her soul. Her mom, Tina, had turned up lifeless inside a Parisian inn. She was merely 45. Authorities publicly labeled it cardiac arrest, yet the medical examiner's report revealed a completely alternative narrative. Tina actually perished from lung fluid buildup, directly triggered by taking way too many sedatives. If it was a total mistake or on purpose, absolutely nobody could confirm. Tina was deeply miserable while wedded to Stavros Naros. That fact was brutally obvious. She was fighting off severe personal struggles, drowning in her unique sorrow regarding Alexander's passing. Yet, regardless of whether she deliberately swallowed that massive dose, or if it was just a terrible slip-up, the final outcome remained completely unchanged. Christina's mom was gone, leaving Christina a $77 million fortune alongside an incredibly overwhelming wave of fresh sorrow. Over just 29 months, Christina suffered the loss of both her brother and mom. Those two individuals who actually experienced her weird, ultra-rich upbringing, guys who truly grasped the unique burden of growing up Onassis like literally nobody else ever would. Media outlets quickly dubbed this the Onassis hex, highlighting the relentless streak of disasters constantly shadowing their bloodline. Her relatives simply considered it absolute torture. Christina, barely 25, stood totally isolated with her dad, inside a universe seemingly hell-bent on wiping out every person she adored. Next, around March 1975, Aristotle Onassis succumbed to severe bronchial pneumonia, even though his physical condition had genuinely been tanking right after Alexander passed away. Reaching 75 years of age, he passed down a colossal syndicate valued roughly around $500 million. Christina scored 55% of the pie. Whatever remained funded a charity created specifically to honor Alexander. Jackie Kennedy, the billionaire's surviving spouse, walked away with a cool $26 million payout. Yet the lion's share of the Onassis wealth, the massive fleets, corporate holdings, and those non-stop obligations dumped squarely onto Christina's shoulders. She was a mere 24. Hunting for authenticity, Christina put in the effort. She gave it everything to match her dad's vision and command the naval dynasty. To essentially validate her right to carry the Onassis banner, she hustled at the main Monaco base, jumped into high-stakes bargaining, and called the shots regarding shipping lanes and freight agreements. Plenty of folks doubted her actual competence, wondering if a young lady could truly manage such an astronomically huge enterprise. Yet she totally shut those haters down. She kept the conglomerate highly profitable for ages. However, corporate life wasn't Christina's true passion. Cash wasn't solving her problems. She felt completely, painfully isolated, constantly hunting for genuine affection in all the worst possible spots. 4 short months following her dad's passing, in July 1975, Christina tied the knot with Alexander Andreadis. The guy hailed from a legendary Greek maritime clan. It honestly felt exactly like the sort of pairing Aristotle might have proudly endorsed. The alliance between two maritime empires felt entirely orchestrated, barely surviving 14 months. Come 1978, Christina made a move that left her entire inner circle completely stunned. She wed Sergei Kaus, a Soviet maritime broker she encountered during corporate discussions over in Moscow. This guy was a low-level government clerk, completely unassuming across the board. Sporting an artificial eye, he would occasionally pop out right in front of people. He shared a cramped 2-room flat with his mom. He gathered neckties and played badminton. Why Christina fell for this guy remained an absolute mystery. Perhaps he actually desired her for who she was, rather than chasing after the famous Onassis legacy and endless wealth. Or maybe he simply showed her the genuine respect her former spouses severely lacked. It is also possible she frantically wanted a way out of her predestined, high-profile existence. Their wedding happened in Moscow during August 1978. Christina relocated into his mom's cramped place. She bailed after just 4 days. Yet Kausov trailed her back to Western Europe, where the couple attempted to patch things up for another stretch. Things officially dissolved 16 months later by May 1980. Rumors claimed Christina handed over an entire vessel during their final legal separation. Gossip circulated that he was secretly a Russian spy, deployed specifically to infiltrate her circle and gather classified information. Reality likely sits somewhere in the middle. Amidst countless weddings and frantic efforts to secure a genuine human bond, Christina was fighting unseen internal battles that outsiders were completely unaware of. She continuously battled her body image, a dark fixation draining her mental focus completely. She would attempt extreme fasting routines, depriving her body for weeks, shedding massive pounds rapidly, only to pack everything back on, plus extra, once the gloom returned, leading her straight back to emotional eating. This endless loop was simply a physical reflection of the deep psychological chaos she couldn't manage. She received a formal clinical depression diagnosis by age 30, even though her close friends already knew she had endured this deep misery for decades. Medical professionals handed out downers for stress, uppers to shed pounds, and heavy sedatives since her racing thoughts kept her awake until dawn. A massive dependency followed. She popped capsules just to get out of bed, to operate normally, to finally rest, and to deaden the relentless sting of severe isolation. She landed in the ER for toxic ingestions several times, while relatives desperately swept those scares under the rug. Tabloids caught on regardless, and rumors trailed her constantly, calling her erratic, disturbed, and labeling her the miserable heiress incapable of managing such vast wealth. A heartbreaking heiress ruining herself at a glacial pace. Word was, she crushed 20 sodas daily. That intense rush of syrup and caffeine became just another way to self-soothe. She wept constantly. Pals claimed she'd completely fall to pieces without any trigger, completely drowned by a sorrow that refused to vanish. During a sit-down following her dad's passing, she admitted her entire world was gone. Her dad, her mom, Alexander. She confessed she was now entirely solitary in this world. Even with endless cash, massive boats, sprawling estates, hired help, and a corporate monopoly behind her, she hit the nail directly on the head. But Christina craved one specific thing: a baby. Someone to cherish, who would return that affection, without any strings attached. Someone who wouldn't abandon her. One last shot. During March 1984, Christina wed for a fourth time. Thierry Roussel was a gorgeous, refined French pharmaceutical heir, running a Parisian talent firm for male models. The pair grew up together, remaining close buddies for decades. Temporarily, it looked as if this specific romantic union could genuinely go the distance. On January 29, 1985, Christina finally welcomed a baby girl into the world. She called her Athena to honor her own mom, keeping the ancestral lineage alive following classic Greek customs. For a fleeting second, Christina grasped her ultimate dream: her very own kid, and a household crafted exactly how she wanted. However, her matrimonial bond was currently crumbling to pieces. Thierry was secretly seeing a Swedish runway star called Marianne Landhodge. He even sired 2 kids with this mistress during his union to Christina. Christina maintained full guardianship of little Athena, diving headfirst into parenting with a fierce dedication she was never shown during her own upbringing. She promised to raise her daughter hands-on, entirely ditching the usual hired nannies and strict tutors. She wanted to give Athena the ultimate gift she lacked herself: an attentive, fully engaged parent, a solid foundation, and a remarkably average youth. Yet Christina still continuously wrestled with severe substance dependencies. During November 1988, Christina visited pals at a sprawling rural property in Tortugas, just outside Buenos Aires, Argentina. On November 19th, the maid found her in the bathtub. She was entirely knocked out and totally unresponsive. Once paramedics finally rushed her to a medical facility, it was already way too late. At 37 years of age, Christina Onassis passed away. Medical examiners uncovered absolutely no traces of intentional self-harm, criminal involvement, or lethal narcotic levels. Medical officials formally ruled her passing as severe lung fluid leading directly to sudden cardiac arrest. Decades of extreme weight loss regimens, medication addiction, plus endless emotional turmoil simply overwhelmed her system. She was laid to rest in the Scorpios Island family cemetery, right next to her dad and sibling Alexander. She passed on total assets valued at roughly $250 million. More importantly, she left a 3-year-old girl to shoulder the entire burden of that dark Onassis family legacy by herself. Dubbed the wealthiest youngster alive, Athena Onassis instantly morphed into one of the globe's most affluent kids in a single night. Barely 3 years of age, the toddler acquired her mom's vast empire, featuring private land masses, real estate holdings, corporate businesses, shipping vessels, and global financial funds. Media outlets quickly dubbed her the wealthiest youngster alive. However, extreme loneliness and unending heartbreak were her true birthright. Christina simply possessed zero faith in Thierry Roussel. Prior to their legal split, she established strict safeguards securing Athena's massive financial future. She assigned a dedicated committee of Greek managers to oversee the wealth until Athena reached age 18. Thierry needed direct authorization from these executives before using a single dime for the child. That specific mandate completely defined how Athena grew up. Taking the young girl, Thierry largely vanished from the media spotlight to the best of his ability. In 1990, he tied the knot with Marianne Landash, the Swedish fashion icon he secretly dated while still wed to Christina. Barely 24 months following Christina's passing, the newlywed couple welcomed a pair of babies. Eric, alongside twin sisters Sandrine and Johanna, immediately providing Athena with one half-brother and a couple of half-sisters. Thierry committed to giving Athena a completely standard upbringing, or whatever constituted standard for a kid holding a multi-million-dollar net worth. Relocating to Switzerland, the family enjoyed a cozy lifestyle that actually lacked typical billionaire extravagance. Rather than enrolling in elite private academies, Athena went to ordinary public education facilities. Yet labeling her daily schooling experience ordinary is quite an overstatement. Heavy security details flanked her constantly, utilizing ex-military specialists drilled in thwarting hostage situations and violent attacks. These professionals monitored her non-stop, tracking every single step she took, maintaining an airtight safety perimeter that served as a constant reminder she simply was not a regular kid. Drivers chauffeured her in heavily armored luxury vehicles, featuring pitch-black tinting to completely block out curious eyes. Security teams mapped out travel paths beforehand, constantly switching directions to avoid predictable routines potential abductors might target. Anybody stepping close underwent intense background checks, surveillance, and strict risk assessments. Such was daily life for the most financially blessed youth on the planet. Endless cash guaranteed, physical protection, while simultaneously purchasing profound loneliness. Thierry demanded she receive the exact same allowance as her younger relatives. Her wardrobe consisted of average apparel rather than showy, high-end fashion brands. Adults required her to complete household duties, pitch in regularly, and avoid acting terribly spoiled despite the massive riches headed her way. Outwardly, the father appeared focused on providing a humble upbringing to prevent bratty behavior. However, a much different hidden agenda was unfolding behind closed doors. Thierry constantly waged war against the Greek financial guardians to tap into his daughter's vast trust fund. Any purchase he attempted for his kid required strict sign-off from the corporate committee Christina established over in Liechtenstein. Those asset managers highly suspected his motives, believing he simply wanted to siphon Athena's funds for personal gain. They relentlessly scrutinized all cash requests. Thierry frequently warned he would relocate everyone to France, seeking better financial leverage and personal advantages under their local tax regulations. That endless war regarding the estate served as the defining theme of Athena's formative years. Maturing with the distinct awareness of being an outsider, she always understood a massive payday awaited, just as she knew her celebrated mom suffered an early, heartbreaking demise. Yet she additionally matured alongside younger siblings, free from the heavy Onassis family moniker. Kids completely ignored by armed guards, and courtroom squabbles, allowed to simply enjoy a carefree youth she desperately missed. Witnessing Eric, Sandrine, and Johanna experience standard youth activities surely stung, especially since her own days involved strict defensive measures and the crushing pressure of an unchosen legacy. Once Athena hit age 13, a noticeable transformation occurred. Finally mature enough to grasp her family title's heavy implications, she publicly declared during a legal hearing that she passionately despised everything related to Greece. During a super-rare press chat with an Italian publication, she pointed fingers entirely at the Onassis legacy for her struggles. She refused to identify as Christina's kid or Aristotle's descendant. She viewed herself simply as an ordinary teen handed toxic wealth, and she fiercely wanted absolutely zero part in that dark inheritance. Equestrian life provided Athena's sole source of true happiness. Having trained heavily since her toddler days, riding horseback offered her the closest thing to actual inner calm. By age 17, she relocated to Brussels for professional equestrian sports, leaving Switzerland behind, escaping her dad's strict grip to forge her own path. There, she crossed paths with a Brazilian rider named Álvaro Aonso de Ranto, who went by Doda. The attractive rider was 12 years her senior and already highly respected across the horse circuit. Athena fell incredibly hard. Thierry strongly disapproved. He believed the older man was just chasing her fortune and considered the whole romance a massive error. Hoping to keep her completely reliant, he tried restricting access to her trust fund. But cash wasn't the only thing Athena got from her mom. She also got her fierce determination. On January 29, 2003, the 18-year-old legally took charge of her estate. While the exact figures remained totally private, experts guessed her net worth hovered around $1 billion, if not higher. Her portfolio included luxury resorts, massive estates, and private islands scattered across the INC, plus New York's Olympic Tower and huge global corporate stakes. She controlled 217 bank accounts, 87 businesses, and 38 shipping vessels. She was likewise entitled to take the reins of the Alexander S. Onassis Foundation, a charity created by her granddad to honor her late uncle. Yet, upon her 21st birthday, the board unexpectedly rewrote their bylaws, stripping away her guaranteed presidency. They claimed she lacked any real ties to her roots, couldn't speak the language, and misunderstood the culture. In their eyes, she wasn't fit to lead such a prestigious national organization. Ultimately, she never assumed her leadership position. That harsh dismissal hurt deeply, validating her lifelong resentment toward the Onassis family name. Her identity felt like a curse rather than an honor, and the immense wealth seemed more like a heavy anchor than a blessing. Desperate for an ordinary life, she tied the knot with Doda Miranda on December 3, 2005, down in São Paulo, Brazil. Their spectacular wedding hosted 700 attendees, primarily composed of Brazilian VIPs and close friends from the horseback riding circuit. Noticeably absent were her dad and stepmom. In lieu of traditional presents, the newlyweds requested charitable contributions from their friends. Following the nuptials, she legally became Athena Onassis de Aranda. Relocating to South America, she poured millions into a massive ranch and dedicated all her energy to competitive riding. The pair jetted worldwide for elite horse shows, crafting a lifestyle that appeared wonderfully ordinary to outsiders. Together, they co-founded 80 Sport Horses, a premier breeding and training facility based over in Belgium. For 11 straight years, they rode side by side, expanded their brand, and genuinely seemed to thrive. Aside from her stable life, she kept a notoriously low profile, dodging the press and completely avoiding the gossip magazines. Living her dream and escaping her famous heiress identity entirely. But sadly, her peaceful reality shattered in 2016. A former Belgian escort randomly approached Alexis Monthkis, a close buddy of the family, carrying a dossier. It held solid proof of an 8-year affair with Doda, hotel invoices, plane tickets, and photos. Exhausted by his endless lies and sick of hiding in the shadows, the mistress was ready to blow the whistle. Monthkis eventually leaked everything in his book, The Storm in the Eye of Athena Onassis, which completely devastated her life. The exact guy she defied her dad to marry, the partner she centered her entire universe around, had basically been cheating on her since day one. A swift split followed, leading into an incredibly messy and hostile legal battle. Doda aggressively fought their prenup, demanding massive alimony, plus battled for custody of their shared horses. The miserable lawsuit dragged through Antwerp, Belgium, their former home base. Things finally wrapped up legally in November 2017, leaving the 32-year-old completely on her own once more. Relocating to Greece, she might have been seeking comfort in the very roots she used to actively avoid. Or maybe she just needed a getaway from the ruins of her broken marriage and isolating quiet. Nowadays, Athena Onassis is 40 years old. She primarily resides in Belgium, even though her massive real estate portfolio still spans the entire world. She still pops up at occasional riding tournaments, though far less often nowadays. A brutal fall from her horse in 2012 caused major spinal trauma. Although she bounced back enough to ride for Greece at the 2013 Europeans and the 2014 Worlds, that crash permanently altered her riding career. She's been noticed at a few gatherings recently, like a 2021 Monte Carlo wedding, where she easily blended into the background, plus a random horse show here and there. But generally speaking, she has essentially dropped off the map, disappearing as much as a legendary billionaire possibly could. Zero social media presence, absolutely no press chats, and totally absent from gossip columns, unless a sneaky photographer catches her near a stable. Athena pulled off the one thing Christina never could, completely disappearing. But honestly, is that really living? Sitting on billions of dollars while spending every day ducking anyone who might actually recognize you? Being the final living heir to a massive 20th century dynasty, yet wanting absolutely nothing to do with that background. The Onassis wealth remains completely intact, overseen by financial planners and board members, pulling in revenue from freight deals, real estate, and corporate stakes. Yet Athena finds absolutely zero happiness in it. She feels zero pride for her granddad's massive empire, or the various companies her mom desperately tried saving. Honestly, she never requested to be born into the Onassis bloodline. She never asked for a massive trust fund. She was barely 3 when her mom died, way too little to clearly remember her, and too young to understand the massive blow. She grew up knowing Christina exclusively through photographs and second-hand tales. Raised by a dad who ultimately sold out her mom, surrounded by step-siblings sharing her dad, but dodging her notorious last name and heavy baggage. Even her own birthright charity basically shoved her out. The marriage she desperately defended simply ended in total backstabbing. Her passed-down history feels way more like a hex than a blessing. Plus, the funds meant to offer her the world just handed her extra reasons to lay low. A pure trail of heartbreak. 2 generations of Onassis women, Christina and Athena, a mom and daughter ripped apart by death, yet permanently tied together through unrequested wealth and completely inescapable heartbreak. Christina lost her entire immediate family over just a few brutal years. She tied the knot 4 times, desperately chasing romance and a genuine bond in a reality where cash bought everything but joy. She constantly wrestled with severe depression, substance abuse, and the suffocating isolation of being the final Onassis. She passed away at 37, leaving behind a 3-year-old toddler and a massive trust fund that felt incredibly vindictive. Athena ultimately inherited both that cash pile and the trauma. She spent her youth shadowed by bodyguards, her adolescence rejecting her Greek roots. As an adult, she desperately chased a regular routine, though normalcy simply isn't an option for someone carrying her notorious last name. She married a guy she thought had her back, only to learn the same brutal lesson her mom did. Cash and true loyalty rarely mix. The Onassis maritime operation hasn't missed a beat. Massive freighters still actively haul cargo globally. Those ventures remain highly lucrative. The charity still writes checks for good causes under Alexander's name. Except the core family that built it all is wiped out. Alexander perished in an aviation disaster at 24. Christina succumbs to cardiac failure at 37. Aristotle passed at 75, totally stripped of everything that meant more than cold, hard cash. Meanwhile, Athena, the lone survivor, actively chooses to stay locked away. She rides in equestrian competitions, barely claiming her notorious title, totally ducking public attention, ducking the legacy, and totally dodging the Onassis reality, except for the massive funds she literally cannot discard. Honestly, the whole situation is incredibly heartbreaking. How a massive fortune meant to guarantee dominance and absolute liberty just morphed into a literal cage. How a title meant to unlock every opportunity just became a massive target. How limitless funds completely failed to block disasters, purchase joy, or hold a family intact. Prior to her passing, Christina openly talked about all her heartbreak. She told any passing listener she was utterly abandoned, insisting her fortune was completely worthless. As it turns out, she hit the nail on the head. Every single luxury yacht, private beach, and massive estate completely failed to resurrect her brother, mom, or dad. Couldn't salvage her broken marriages, cure her dark moods, snap her bad habits, or plug that massive emotional hole. Athena won't shed tears or speak out when cameras roll. Watching her mom suffer taught her that public visibility just invites intense agony. That holding the Onassis title guarantees a life of intense scrutiny, constant criticism, and zero grace to just exist normally. Because of that, she practically erased herself from society, constructing barriers so massive that even with infinite cash, she's completely alone. A pair of women across decades, drowning in cash, yet totally cut off. An identical cycle wrapping itself in fresh details. A classic nightmare featuring a brand new cast. Christina constantly chased a deep connection she'd never actually capture. Athena spent hers ducking a birthright she vehemently rejected. The Onassis title once meant ultimate prestige, dazzling status, and endless riches. But today it represents a completely different reality. Total heartbreak. Absolute isolation. The exact misery that cash fails to stop and notoriety simply amplifies. If a family hex existed, it was never about the Onassis crew passing away prematurely. Rather, the true nightmare was surviving just long enough to realize their massive empire failed to actually provide the essentials. That epic trust fund meant to bless their lives was secretly just a massive weight, proving that stacking cash and finding real joy sometimes completely clash, particularly since having that kind of money brings heavy demands, endless heartbreak, and a family legacy heavier than gold. Christina truly battled her destiny. She went through multiple husbands, managed the corporate empire, lived it up on Scorpios, and eventually had a little girl meant to shatter the family curse. Ultimately, though, that massive burden simply broke her down. A vicious mix of prescription drugs, soda, extreme dieting, deep despair, and the crushing isolation of surviving as the final Onassis claimed her at 37. Athena took notes. She picked utter seclusion instead of battling. She prefers hiding completely rather than suffering. She remains an incredibly wealthy billionaire nobody recognizes, which happens to be precisely how she likes it. Fading into obscurity, finding total peace, living as literally anybody except an Onassis. Honestly, That might just be the most heartbreaking finale imaginable. The ultimate payoff to a sprawling saga of maritime fortunes, worldwide monopolies, and iconic legacies is simply a 40-year-old woman desperately hoping to stay. Tucked away with her horses, spending every waking moment running from the absolute certainty she can never outrun. Her bloodline as Aristotle Onassis's granddaughter. This tragic downfall of the Onassis women has absolutely nothing to do with corporate bankruptcy. The cash never vanished. The conglomerate still thrives. The true devastation was entirely emotional. Watching 2 generations slowly crumble beneath relentless demands, profound grief, and a famous surname that guaranteed the world, yet handed them nothing except pure agony. Christina and Athena, mother and child, hunting for a peace no fortune could buy, each discovering on her own terms that inheriting the Onassis legacy guaranteed an agonizingly solitary existence. If this documentary kept you hooked, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another wild ride through history.